Are you familiar with the chainmaker's swage? Have you ever heard of such a thing? From the hole out.
For twisting it.
We're going to bend it. Sorry? Okay, let's get going. Is that on? We've got sound? It's on? Yeah. So we're going to start with a little bit of that ring that we were making yesterday, see if we can't finish that off. And then we'll go into other sort of more toolage and maybe a bit of heat treatment. So we'll see what we can do with that. Later will be good.
I'm done.
Thank you. So what I'm going to try and do now is pull that little section that we're working on around. I'm just going to put a bit of a point on this. Hopefully it will make it a little easier to slip through. Very nice, thank you. Just warm that up a bit, and we'll see if we can't make that go in. There we go. So what I've got now is I've got the end that I was working on, and I'm going to try and just pin my non-working end as I hopefully pull that hot end around. And you can see it's a little awkward. Thank you, James. Once I've got that bit done, hopefully I'm going to slide this piece out, he said. There we go, it's coming. Now I can move that into there. I've got a placeholder for that I can hopefully stick into there like so, with a bit of luck, and I can pull round that last little bit. So remember how we had the note on the anvil, twist the right direction? The next note says make sure the tops go on top and the bottoms go on the bottom, you know, because that can be a bit frustrating too. Just there, please. If you get the hole warm, that's fine, I understand. So about a year ago, I was on my way to a conference, and I took a little tumble on my motorcycle, and ended up spending a little bit of time in hospital. It was a bit of an exciting day, and so at the end of the day I decided I'd rather have a nap. You know, I'd been bounced around from hospital to hospital and things. And so I'm waking up from this nap, and there's a guy standing at the foot of my bed. And he had a sort of dress and a pallor that resembled something that I thought I knew. And I said, well, I know what you are, I just don't know who you are. And he said, well, I'm a blacksmith. He says, I just got a call from some of the guys down in Carbondale, said you had an accident, I just came by to make sure you're okay. I said, well, I am. I said, but I need to stand up. I've got to move around a little bit. I said, the nurses are not cutting it, you know, they're about this thin, you know. And he said, that's all right, son, I can help you, you know. Thank you, you know. So I walk around, he says, I've got to go. I've got to go and pick up my wife, but there'll be another guy here in about 5 minutes if you just hang on. And so he went, and the guy came, he says, what are we doing? He said, we're walking around, we want to make a channel in this floor. That's what we've got to do, we're going to walk. He says, well, I've got about an hour, but that's all right, there'll be another guy here in an hour. And it was like that for about 5 days. So if you don't think we don't have family right here, think again. It was excellent, excellent. Paul drives down to the crash scene, picks up my motorbike, 100 miles, drives back, puts it into the BMW dealership. My wife is unfortunately visiting her father and can't get away for a little while, but Paul's going on a cruise. So he says to his daughter, go and pick Nancy up from the airport, loan her this car, it's hers for as long as she wants it, she can stay here, and when they come out of hospital, they stay here until they're ready to leave. Done. You'd think that would be the end of it, but about 2 or 3 months later, when my motorcycle is all repaired and hopefully back to pristine position, Paul says, I'll just ride it down for you. So he rides it, I don't know, 900 miles, parks it, gets a flight back. I was rather impressed by that. And I'm not easily impressed, but that impressed me. Yeah. You know, so when you start, again, it was just that, we're going to just straighten that up. I can see it's going south already, so I'm just going to try and straighten that up a little bit. There we go. That one's hot, so I'm going to put another one in. You know how that goes, yeah?
Another note on the anvil.
Yeah.
Don't pick up the house and slave.
I'm just going to try and pull this around. I might just tap that with the hammer, because that's not going too well. I'm going to take another heat and give me something in there. Like that. Now they're both hot. So then time moves on, and I get a letter from your president, and in the letter is a cheque for my honorarium for coming to demonstrate. He says, Rocky Mountain Smiths felt that you'd made a good faith effort to come forward and demonstrate. We feel that we should pay you. And you might need this, you know, with your hospital bills, etc. As it happened, I didn't, and I was able to return the cheque. But again, you know, another feel-good factor, you know, warm and fuzzy. I was all over that. Thank you. So it's funny, you know, we all have our, you know, different beliefs, political persuasions, whatever. But when it matters, it does come together quite well. This is not, there we go, that's better. Now, remember the note, make sure one is on top of the other. This one's not at the moment, so we're just going to lift this one up like that and see if we can't convince that to go in. There we go. Just take the heat there. That'll come out when we stretch the hole. So what I have a chainmaker swage, or it's an adaptation of a chainmaker swage. So do you remember our little competition a couple of nights ago? So a chainmaker swage would fit in the hardy hole, and it's drawn down to a bit more of a taper, and that distance at the end there is about the width of the chain link that you were making, the inside diameter. And as you forge that down, of course, it'll increase in height. You don't knock it back down, you leave that, and in fact you pinch it a little bit, and that's a stop for the hammer. So you know you're not going to over-thin, you're not going to over-thin your chain when you're dressing it. I've just got a fairly straight, fuller groove here. The chain maker would be a lot more rounded, would be a lot rounded round here. So you can move this thing up and down, turn it around. And that would give you the shape of your chain rather than going to the bick and trying to work it out over the bick. Thank you, James. That's better, isn't it? Okay. Like that. I'm going to hope that comes out like that. There it is. Okay, so we made a few decisions yesterday, and one of them was to offset the centre by about 1/2 inch, was it not? Remember how we moved 1/2 inch? Because we said if we didn't do that, the weld is going to be in the wrong place. The weld is going to be 1 inch over here. You can see how by that 1/2 inch offset, we've got the weld roughly where we want it. They're not quite overlapping yet. And at this stage, this is, let's say, reasonably round. And obviously, we've got some material in the upset, so it's not going to be the correct diameter that we want. The other thing is I have to overlap these so I can weld them. So this one is reasonably bulletproof because the important bit is on that side of the bar. This one is a little bit risky. So I'm going to try and make most of my corrections here, and if I have to, I'll sneak in a hammer blow over there, but I'll try and plug it with the piece as I do that. And I want those scarves overlapping. I want to try and give myself as much advantage when I make a weld as I can, because I've got a little bit of time invested in this, and I don't want to drop it right now. Okay. The other thing that's going on behind the scenes is we know there's a weld coming up, so James has been rat-holing coke. He's been making a bit of coke, putting it off to the side, make a bit more coke, put it off to the side. And so when we go to do our forge weld, he's just going to sneak those in and we have a nice coke environment, hopefully free from the fly ash, and we stand a better chance of getting the weld. So back to the chain making, you saw there was a few of us in our sort of frenetic attempts to make chain were welding without flux. Did you see that? Yeah. And you have to get it a little hotter. Heat compensates for the flux, and you're trying to put the scale into a solution basically. And then when you hit it, same sort of stuff, the scale exits and you should get a weld. And I can do that occasionally. But I don't rely on that. I actually don't like to weld without flux. I prefer to use flux, not because I think it'll help me get the weld, but it helps me get the weld at a lower temperature. And that lower temperature will stop that little cracking. You've seen the cracking, the heat cracking. And so there's some pieces that I don't want that cracking on. The other thing it will do is if I have something like a leaf and I'm welding it to a bar, you know, I can protect the leaf so much with the flux because it'll go over and make a little barrier, preventing the oxide, the scale that Ernie was talking about. So I use flux as a tool, but yes? Question? Oh, sorry. I got my things in, I can't hear. We're not welding, we're just moving.
You're going to weld it?
We're not going to weld it, we're just moving. Yeah. Nice welding heat though, that's what we want, but next time. So what I'm going to do is just try and sneak these into a better position. And I'm going to just close that one down. That's it? Good enough. Okay, so now we're going to try and weld that.
Now weld?
Now weld. And I've got some glue around here somewhere. Here we go. So what I'm trying to say is that the flux for me becomes a tool rather than a crutch. So hopefully I can make the weld. I know I can make the weld without flux. I just like to be able to make the weld a little cooler. Is that going to be all right for you? Are you going to flux for me? Oh.
What kind of flux do you use?
This is Magic Mystery Flux. It's available. I import it from the Orient. It's a derivative of 2 out of 3 welding flux. Wouldn't you be happy with 2 out of 3? Yeah. Yes, when it's delicate work. So it's anhydrous borax to stop the humour, and I don't really care about the anhydrous bit. I do care that it's a large crystal and goes on and makes a glass fairly quickly, or glass-like substance. What I don't like for the 20 mule team is it makes that effervescence, especially if you've got a bit of moisture in there. I prefer it just goes on and make glass and lets me go to work. So let's see if we can do this.
Have you ever used silica sand? I've heard people talk about using silica sand for plots.
No, I've never have, and I don't have any experience. I know they do, or did. I've never done it. You know, I'm over here for a reason. There was two things. I played a lot of rugby, but I couldn't drink very much. And that's a black mark in Wales. And I had to use flux when I was welding in the blacksmith shop. So it says, you, get the flux out of here and get yourself over to the colonials. So here I am. So when's it ready to weld? Now? Yeah, sounds like now. Yeah, okay. Nice, James. Very nice. What are you doing for the rest of the year? So the idea or the hope now is we've welded it, hopefully, top and bottom. Now we should be able to come here to our chainmaker's sway as opposed to come here, which is going to be a bit frustrating. Okay. Thank you, James. That's the money well, doesn't it? I mean, that's the bit. Yeah. Now we can relax, have a cup of coffee.
So, Mark, you were saying when making that switch, you just let it pooch out to the side.
I'd like it pooch out, yeah. I don't mind it pooching out this way, pooching out to the sides. I'd roll those so that makes the same as the link. And I don't mind it getting higher. I want it to be, I'd taper this, allow it to creep up height. And so the difference in height between the bottom of the fuller and the top of the blob would be the thickness of the chain link that you're working on. So where I grew up, you've got the Midlands just next door, and the Midlands made a lot of chain. And so you could go and buy an anvil there, but the anvil will have two hardy holes. It's a chainmaker's hardy hole. Oh, beautiful. I can't weld with that. I'm just going to sort of try and put a bit of shape to this now. See if we can't just tighten that a little bit. I can see that hole's going south a little bit. We're just going to take a general heat if we can. And so you would have one step of the forge welding process here, another step here for the chain makers, and then it would go down the line. And you heard about the Oliver. The Oliver used to be, you'd have basically a tree or something there with a couple of planks on with hammerheads, and you'd have basically little foot pedals here that would pull on a bit of string. It'd be bang, 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 bang out the door. And that was the Oliver. It's kind of fun. So I made two of those cone things. You can hopefully see that this one is slightly smaller at the top than the first. And the idea is that I should be able to get in here and start to manipulate this. Just a bit of a bend there. As I try and get this round. Let's take a bit of bar. Let's just pop that. So this is not going to fit yet, but you can see that it fits around there. That's what I'm looking for. This one looks slightly out of kilter, but it looks like it'll accept the 1/2 inch, not too bad. So I just need to warm the whole thing up, and whilst that's happening, I'm going to put a little bit of a taper on the end of this bar. And then we're going to see if we can't just shape it up. And if that bar fits all the way through, side to side, we're going to call it good. Yeah. If it doesn't, we're going to call it experimental prototype. I don't know if you've ever stood here, but it's a lonely spot. Isn't it a lonely spot? Yeah. It's just time ticks on. You can hear it tick, tock, tick. Yeah. God, I wish this was over. I want to get out of here so bad. Why didn't that go right? I wish it had gone the other way. You should really try it. Actually, my introduction to demoing, I never fancied standing here, but I was sitting where you are now, and who's the gargoylist? We had him here. You were doing the turkey thing. What was that? What was his name? Bill Rowan. And so Bill Rowan's here making this turkey out of pipe. And thank you. And halfway through this, he just stops. He says, "I've had a complete mental break." He says, "I've lost my image of the turkey." Does anybody here ever hunt a turkey or anything like that? And there were a few people who said, we included Paul here. Yeah, I've hunted a turkey. And he says, how do they go? What does it look like? And Paul gave this rendition of a turkey moving through the woods. It was rather good. Could you would you mind? Just, show, yeah. So a little off there, but if we just give that a little tap. Okay, we're going to fuss with that a little bit, but you can see good welding here, good welding here. Okay, let me see if I can't get that out of there, and then we'll fuss with it a bit more. So I saw this and I heard the laughter of the people, in the audience responding to Bill Rowan and Paul going around.
General heat?
General heat, please.
Tell us what it looked like.
So, well, and that's what I heard the sound, but I couldn't capture the image. What does a turkey look like, Paul?
I don't do that anymore. I've lost a lot of weight.
And so, if you can imagine, there's Paul and maybe 4 or 5 others, because turkeys go in herds, don't they, or whatever, flocks. So Bill's there and Paul, gobble, gobble. Going on, and I am just in tears. Tears are rolling down. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. And I thought, if you can have a bit of fun like that as a demonstrator, maybe it's not such a bad job after all. Maybe I can have a go. And that was what we did. So that was the fun side of it. Do we have a brush? Yes, we do. We might as well brush it. I don't know why we should start now. Sorry? Okay, lovely, thank you. That's it, we're going to call it good. I'll just give it another little tap. And we're going to say, job done. We're going to move on to brighter things.
What's the difference between the two cones that you have?
One is a 2-slot, one is a 2-slot, one is a 4-slot.
Okay.
So I can't get this
All right.
into there, right? But I can't use this to do that. So I need the 2. Okay. That, when it came out after the welds, you saw it wasn't particularly pristine.
Right.
Okay, it's not going to fit on that size of hole, where you can see it did fit on this one. I could slap it around a little bit and it quickly gained shape. Now, there's a couple of tools you can make. I'm going to call them your get out of jail free tools. So I make one that's square and one that's round. And if one of those was just not doing quite what it wanted to do, I'd have just taken this and just squared it up a little bit. Okay, but it was close enough. Same if it was a round hole. Just take the round one, just stop it in there, just do what I have to do, excuse me, and then go away. Very nice there. So I take a square and check that for square. When you make the round one, just take a bunch of concentric washers, 1/inch, 3/4, whatever, and slip them on, and you can check for round down your taper to make sure that it is truly round, because round's what you want. Okay, and that's a nice way of testing for it. This was a demo model, in my mind. And so I put angle iron on because it made it lighter, and then I've got a hole in here. And you can see at the top end of one hole, you've got that, is a little gap. That little gap that the top of my rule's in. And so what could happen is I could come to any size hardy hole. Because it's angle iron, I can file it down if it's a bit big. And if it's too small, I could pop that in there, and then I could make a wedge, drive it in across the corners, and I could get it to fit. And that little blip allowed the wedge to sort of sink down a little bit. So that was the theory. Never really had to use it, so it's theory only, unfortunately. Okay, what should we do now? Okay, let's talk about tools. I'm going to make a tool. It's a simple tool. We've all made this tool before.
Mark, what do you use in the replacement for case?
What was the question?
What do you do for a replacement for caseonite?
I have the world's supply of caseonite.
That's where it all went.
That's where it all went.
Okay.
So I don't have an answer for you. So as soon as I heard they were going belly up, out I went.
So what do you use caseonite for?
Caseonite is it's basically ground up dead things. So if you take a piece of mild steel, let's say a tool or a bottom tool, and because this is nice and easy to make out of mild steel, it's a little harder to make out of a tool steel. And I can make one of these, and then if I wanted to firm it up, I would take my ground up dead things and put them on, hot. And then the ground up dead things burn, and the gas goes into the steel, the hot steel. The easiest way to get something, an element, into the hot steel is as a gas. And so it goes in there, and then you pull it out, and you quench it, and now you've got a high carbon skin on the outside, and it's really stiff, but you've still got that durable core to make it somewhat resilient. Sorry?
What's in the ground up dead thing?
Well, the ground up dead, so in Britain, there's two different, we have the Britain version and you have the American version. So the British version, we have rose petals, which we gently dry in the summer breeze and grind, and grind up into, and they fit there, and as you go, it just reminds me of summer. And the American version, I'm trying to think of a polite way of saying this. I can only assume that you have a proliferation of dead skunks. So I can tell you what it's not. It is not bone, it is not tooth.
Okay.
And that is very important. So bone and tooth, when burnt, produce cyanide.
With what?
Produce cyanide.
Oh.
Yeah, ooh. So it used to be that that had bone and tooth in it, and it would produce the cyanide. And then someone decided that was not necessarily a good thing, and they switched the recipe. So you'll read all the old guys, they would take whatever it is they're trying to case harden, put it in a tin, pack it full of bone and bone meal and such, stick it in there and bake it for 4 hours. And it does the same thing, but just aware that there's a lot of cyanide in that thing when you open it. Now it does clear your nostrils, but it's a short-term benefit. So did you go to the social last night out in the garden? Yeah? Did you sit in any of the plastic chairs? Did you notice every back of the plastic chairs had teeth mark out of it? Did you see that? The guys who've got the beer. Yeah. So I'm making a bottle opener and we're going to hang it out there and we'll leave it out there. But we're going to heat treat a tool. I've got the tool that we made yesterday, the slot punch. The unfortunate thing is I'm a little more long-winded in the way I do my heat treatment than perhaps this morning was. So you'll have to bear with me a little bit. Thank you. So you can see I'm working on two sides. This side, can you see, is somewhat my weak side, and this side is really quite strong. So if I've got a weak and a strong side, I take the weak side first, because whatever I do with the weak side, I can generally catch up to with the strong side, not necessarily the other way around. So this is for the guys who are just starting. We did the sort of high-end stuff. Now we're doing the low-end stuff. So if you're just starting blacksmithing, let me know and I'll make sure you get special instruction. So we're making a little wizard head bottle opener. Yeah, and all we're doing is creating the wizard's head. And I'm going to stop for you, Carl, so you can have a look at it in a minute.
You're making that from 3/4 stop?
I'm making this at a 1/2 inch. Sorry, mate. There you go.
It was kind of a teardrop punch and then a round punch.
Yeah, I'll pass my punches around. And both of these were made with sucker rod. Sucker rod is the rod that comes off the end of the derricks from the oil. They come in a variety.
The one that pumps oil.
The one that pumps oil. They have a variety of diameters, from about 5/8 up to about 1.25 inches, I think. Scott did you have a comparison chart, don't you, on the various sucker rods and what they could be chemically made of, because that's nice to know when you go into your heat treatment cycle of hardening and tempering. And so I live north of Bakersfield, and we've got to have over 1,000 wells. And each one of those wells has got to be half a mile deep or more. And they scrap this stuff on a regular basis because they don't like it breaking in the hole. And so I can go down to my scrapyard and buy a mile of this stuff today. And I can go back down tomorrow and buy another mile. Yeah.
What sizes does it normally be?
The standard size for my area is 3/4 of an inch. But I believe it will go from 5/8 to 1.25 inches. The biggest I've seen is 1.25 inches. And the chemical properties will vary depending upon the oil and the nature of the environment it's coming out of. So if you have a high sulfur dioxide, high corrosive gases in the well, then you're going to have, they have a higher nickel content in the rod. If you've got a well that sort of has to snake around a little bit, then you're going to have a rod chemical that will allow that to happen and still work.
And they also, if it's a high paraffin well, then it goes a bigger round rod.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, because it has to pull so much harder.
Right, okay. So those are all things to bear in mind. So, let's supposing you wanted to use a bit of mystery metal to make your punch or whatever it is you wanted to do. I'm going to make a little bit of a beard here. So how do you know what it's made of? Well, that's a bit of a small nose. You just go down to the scrap heap, you buy the first thing that's shiny, and you bring it home and you say, have I got tool steel? Yeah. And what's free machining steel? 12L14, yeah? Or 12, yeah. And so you've got lead-infused steel. So what's the melting temperature of lead, roughly? 800. 800, okay. Which is what in terms of a temperature on steel? What colour? Black heat. What temperature does lead go gas at? It's going to follow pretty closely after the melting temperature, I think. So we're working at twice the melting temperature here of lead. So if you get some 12L14, I'm going to bet at some stage you're going to see that that lead is coming out in a gaseous form. And you're standing right there, and the quickest way to get anything into anybody is as a gas. Not necessarily a great thing to do. And then we've got cobalt and other high metals, heavy metals, that are also into some of this stuff. So the mystery metal to me, not just hard to heat treat, because I don't know what it is, but it represents a health danger to me. And so I tend not to use it. I go down and buy my sucker rod, and yes, it's not the best steel I can use, but I can live with it. Let's supposing you were bound and determined to use this mystery metal that you've got, and you've got enough of it that where you can do a little experiment. How would you carry on? So I would take a little bit, and I would draw it down until it makes a flat bar. And I would come in and nick it with my chisel, every 5/8 or something like that. Don't really care, don't get hung up on the details. And then I would heat that to what I would consider would be an appropriate temperature for an air-quenching steel, same as Ernie was using this morning. And that would be about 1800 degrees or so. And I would allow it to air quench. And then I would take it to the vise, and I'd clamp it so that one of those nicks, I clamp it vertically, so one of those nicks is near the jaws of the vise. And if that were hard, if it was an air-quenching steel, and it were hard, what would I expect to happen when I hit it with my hammer? They would shear off, it would break, wouldn't it? Go ping, yeah. And so if it doesn't go ping, and if it bends, I can rule out air-quenched steel, can I not? So I think, okay, well, it wasn't air-quenched steel. So I go, heat it up again, and I oil quench it. And I heat it up to, I don't know, 1500 degrees or so. And I quench it in oil. Should be making it hard if it's an oil quenched steel. I chuck it up in the vise again when it's cold. and I hit it again. And if it doesn't go ping, it wasn't hard. And if it didn't go ping, it wasn't an ore quench steel. So I think, okay, it must be an ore quench steel. So then, you got that? So then I heat it up and I quench it in water. And I put it in the vise and I hit it with my hammer. And it should go ping, because if it doesn't, it's mild steel, right? Yeah, you were conned. And so it goes ping. Okay, so you know now that it's a water quench steel. Well, that's good. The hat, please. But what temper is useful? So now what I do is I heat it up. I've heated up, it's hard, I know that. So now I induce a flame here, and I run the temper colours this way. So we're going to have, you know, the blues, the purples, and the straw colours. And I'm trying to get Parker colour in each one of those squares, or by the chisel mark, roughly. Again, don't get hung up on the details. And so now I've got something that is hardened, because I quenched it in water, and I've got a temper, but I don't know what temper is appropriate. So I start at the hardest one, which is straw. I come up here, I put a little something over it, and I hit it. If it goes ping, it's too hard, right? Not the correct temper. Slide it up to bark straw. Hit it. If it goes ping, too hard. Wrong temper. And I hit it up until it goes, ooh, that's solid. And that would be water quench, whatever it was, appropriate temper. And now I can use the mystery, I can at least use the mystery metal without knowing what it is. Yeah? Thank you, James. So I'm not an advocate of scrap steel, but if you're going to do that, then you should at least know how to harden and temper it. And a blacksmith should make his own tools. That's what we do, right? Just around there. And then the other thing is, if you buy factory steel, it's going to come with a set of instructions. And I don't know that we need to be metallurgists, but we should at least understand what they're trying to tell us to heat treat this, you know, hardness, tempering, etc. And so there's a number of books out there that'll dumb it down, because it's quite scientific, to the level that I can understand it anyway. And so I can do what they're asking for, carry it out in the manner that they would like it carried out in. Thank you, James. So just changing gears a little bit, let's put your artist hat on now. That hat was straight, right? And I want you to think, how did that look artistically? Was it right? Was it wrong? Was it a strong presence? Was it not such a strong presence? What did I do when I put the eye on? Did it make it better? Did it make it worse? What did I do when I curved it? Did it make it better? Did it make it worse? Because you should make these evaluations, because you're going to make these decisions in your own work at some stage. So I get I'm going to call myself a technician, rightly or wrongly. I'm not really an artist. And so when I look at this sort of stuff, I defer to other people to make my decisions for me. And one of the people I defer to is William Hogarth, I think it is, of the 17-something or others. And he did a treatise on the aesthetics of beauty and paintings. I'm going to heat it down there and we're going to cut it off. Thanks, James. And he did what he considered were the beauty of line. And he had 7 lines that he drew on a piece of paper, and none of them were straight. They all have an S-curve of some description. And his number 4, supposedly, was the nape of a woman's neck coming down to a little bit, you know, the lumbar region. And so that's what I defer to. If it's good enough for him, you know, and he's been printed from then up till now, then it's good enough for me. So I'm looking at that gentle S-curve in my work. So I don't have to make that decision. I can defer to William Hogarth. All right, going back to the engineer's hat, we're going back to hardening and tempering. William Hogarth. Hogarth, Hogarth, and do that with spell check. Yeah, you're all aware I just finished my third book and took it out there. That means that both I and spell check can take a rest. Yeah, a well-earned rest. Accept. What are we looking for?
What are we looking for? Part from this morning? Around.
The last part, piece that Ernie demonstrated on, has anybody seen it?
Are these Ernest tongs?
No, they're my tongs.
Oh, here's
You got a little button?
Yes, yeah, I've got something. I've got something.
that 1 inch in
Yeah, I've got
diameter,
it.
about this long.
Last thing we're doing was fullering on
I
it.
got it.
There it is. There it is.
I won't tell you what that looks like.
Thank you, Mark.
Lift your game. So I'm going to take this now 1/2 inch square and I'm going to knock it down to make what I hope is going to be something about 3/4 by 1/4 of an inch. Bit of flat bar. And that's what I'm going to use to make the church key for the bottle opener. But I'd like to use the punch that I made yesterday to punch the hole that I'm going to drift to make the church key. So I need to know how to heat treat that. Let me see if I've got a better pair of tongs there. Did I give you a better pair of tongs? No. Thank you. What do you want to use? And so when that's 3/4 of an inch wide, it should be about 1/4 of an inch thick or so. Okay, I'm just going to true that up. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to make our tool, harden and temper it. Do you remember yesterday we were talking about the similarities between the stew, Dentimore stew, and steel? Yeah, we've got a can of Dentimore stew and steel, and I'd say they're both the same sort of thing. So what I'm going to do now, let me take a can of Dentimore stew. I pour the contents into the pan, and I put it onto the stove on high for 30 seconds. Have I released the full subtleties of the flavour of the Dentimore stew? No, it takes longer than that. You know that. We've been there. Okay, it takes a little longer than that. So if I take this and just chuck it into the fire and bring it up to heat really quickly, have I released the full subtleties of the steel? No. I need to give it sufficient time for all of the composites of that to start making their way around and make a nice homogeneous blend. So if I warm the stew up slowly, encouraging its character, you can see, and just allow the aroma to fill the kitchen. Yeah? Now I'm getting something that I can use. So that's what I'm doing with this. I'm going to warm it up slowly and allow it, all those different parts, to get to where they want to be. I just want to find a fire. No, not hotter. That's good. File. I normally use a broken grinder wheel for this, but I must have left it at home. Thank you. So this is a little warm. I'm going to let that cool down. I'm going to go in the water, and I'm going to try and shade the hot, very expanded, versus the hot, very expanded, versus the cold, very contracted. 1,000, 2,000, 3. Now you can see I'm also moving around to a new bit of water, so I'm not generating a pocket of steam and working in that. And if I'm feeling really good, I'm going to tap my head. There we go. Yeah. Right. So now I've got a reserve of heat there. I'm going to come in, I'm going to polish that with Armando's file. And I'm going to let the heat from here move down here. So in which direction does heat travel? From hot to cold. Up, down, sideways, doesn't make any difference. Okay, and I'm going to let that go. And I want the straw colour, which is about the same size as, same colour as my rule, to reach the bottom here. And that's the temper that I want with this particular steel, which I consider a 4130. And that will make it hard enough to use as I go to work. So I'm letting the colours run down. As soon as the colour's getting close to the end, doesn't have to be at the end, 1, 2. All I did was arrest the creep of the heat, but without chilling it significantly. Get rid of the oxide colours. And wait for a second round. Can you see that, Carl? Can you see the colours?
I can see some blue this way just a little bit. Getting a reflection.
Sorry. I wonder what happens if I do that. Can you find me?
Can't see. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, can you see the blue at the top? Yeah, and then the sort of purples and the browns, and hopefully something near the straw colour towards the bottom.
Yep.
So I'm going to get rid of that. Polish it again. I'm hoping I can get one more out of that. Now, one is good. If you just get it once, that's fine. If you get it twice, it's better. And if you get it 3 or 4 times, it's better again. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to let time at temperature do the job. So 1 is great. I say twice is better. You're here. Okay, in the interest of knowledge, I am taking a quest here now. I am putting myself in direct danger. My wife, no, we're just going to let it cool down, whose kitchen oven is beyond compare. Okay, but my wife goes out every Thursday night to a poker night. Okay, she's out there drinking, smoking cigars, whatever she does out there. And that's my access into the kitchen oven. So I get in there and I dial it up to about 400 and something degrees, harden all my tools and run into the kitchen oven and put them in the oven and let them sit there for a period of time. And generally it's about an hour per inch of cross section, if I can. Okay, now the issue is that sometimes I've had to quench in oil because I use an oil quench steel. Now burning oil has a certain odour. Okay, it can, aroma, that's the word I'm looking for, aroma, yeah. And it can only be surpassed by fresh paint. Okay, so I think, the door's looking a bit dingy again. Why don't I just give it a bit of a paint? So I get out there and paint away. And then when it's all done, come out, and then Nancy comes in. You paint the door again? No, needed it. It was So we all hear the stories about, knives or swords were quenched in the blood of a virgin and all this sort of stuff. And there may be a speck of truth to that, not in the way that perhaps some of you are thinking of. But I'm going to think the blacksmith was next door to the candle maker, next door to the butcher. Okay, he's probably slaughtered his own stuff, probably doesn't buy it in, so he's probably strung a lamb up, slaughtered it. The blacksmith has tried quenching his sword in water, didn't go so well, bucket of blood there because the butcher doesn't, so he quenches it in the lamb's blood. That tempered well, blood of a virgin lamb, whatever. The rest of it is lost to details. So I only quench and harden and temper on Thursday nights, and I face southeast. That's the only bit that gets put. Thursday nights, you've got to face southeast. And that's only because I can see Nancy's headlights coming up the drive from the southeast window. Okay, so. Yeah, I paint the window. You need it again. Looking a little dingy. Yeah.
So where did the urine of a red-headed 7-year-old come from?
Urine of a red-headed 7-year-old. Well, I can tell you it's not in Wales. Okay, we don't have redheads in Wales. Probably Ireland. Yeah, so they've got a lot of red. Oh, Scotland. Yeah, they have some redheads, but it's definitely not Wales. Yeah. So I'm allowing that to cool down to a point where it's reasonably cool. And now I can just give that a quench, and we'll see if we can't make that go to work. All right, James, we're going to carry on with this one. So that's heat treated. And I bet you had no idea that happened, did you?
So Mark, I noticed your apron there has a bit of fringe.
Oh, fringe, yeah, and we've been talking about tour. Dan's giving me some cues here. Let's tell the story. Cut the blast. Take the rest of the afternoon off. So you can insert the name of your famous deity in here, but King Arthur has just built Camelot, okay, and he's waiting for the concrete to cure or whatever it was. And he goes to the craftsman and craftswoman, of course, and says, I want to give you a feast so I can honour what you've done here. You've done a great thing. So come into the Great Hall, and if you had a lot to do with the building of Camelot, sit nearest to me. If you had least to do with it, then sit furthest away. That way I can give honour where honour is due. And so they sort themselves out, of course. And Blacksmith, of course, just comes from the forge, you know, so he just tacks himself on the end of the table. And so Arthur's there, and he's just eating his dinner, and he's waiting for the dessert to come round. And you can see he's a studious chap, Welsh guy actually, believe it or not. Studious chap. So he puts down his knife and fork, and he goes to the first person and says, tell me, what is it you do? He says, sire, I'm your tailor. You know, the robes you're wearing, I made those. He said, those tapestries on the wall, I helped weave those. Arthur says, you did great work, thank you. He goes to the next guy and says, tell me what you do. He says, sire, I'm your goldsmith. You know, the goblet that you're drinking from, the platter that you're eating off, the gold wire in the tapestries. I did all that for you. You truly are a great craftsman, thank you. Next guy's a silversmith, similar sort of tale. You know, the stonemason, I did the arches and the cobbles, the Gothic arch, yeah. Okay. And then goes down, there's a carpenter, at the end of the table is the blacksmith. He said, well, what do you do? He said, well, I knocked up the hinges for the big door, but that would be about it, really. So Arthur goes back, and he's eating his ice cream, or whatever he was eating. And again, you can see he's mulling this over a little bit. Something's not sitting quite right. So he gets up after that, and he goes to the tailor, and he says, tailor, he says, your needles, your scissors, where'd you get those from? He says, sorry, I just ran down the blacksmith shop. Goldsmith, your hammer, your stakes, where'd you get those from? So I just send the boy down the blacksmith shop. Silversmith, where'd you get your tools from? Yeah, blacksmith. Stonemason, where'd you get your chisels, your hammer? I just go down the blacksmith shop. Yeah, carpenter, blacksmith, where do you get your tools from? I make them. That is my craft. By hammer, by hand, all crafts do stand. So Arthur says, okay, well, let's have a little change here. Why don't we move the tailor down the bottom here, and why don't we bring the blacksmith up the top? Because without him, none of this would have taken place. So the tailor's not too happy with this, of course. So he sneaks underneath the table, which has got a nice tablecloth. Yeah. Wales is cultured, and he comes up the thing, and he snips the blacksmith's apron and puts a little fringe on it. Okay, and so when the blacksmith stands up, somebody looks at him and says, you've got a fringe on the bottom of your apron, what's that for? The blacksmith looked at it and he said, oh, that's just a tailor telling me I'm the king of the crafts. But it tells you that's what we do. We make our own tools, yeah? Whether it's Ernie's method, my method, the next guy's method, doesn't matter. We make our own tools. You can't go and buy them off the shelf. You have to make them. Yeah, if you want to make those wizard tools, you're going to have to make them. And so, heat treating them, we can make the body. Any blacksmith can chuck a bit of steel in there, smack it around a bit, and make the body of the tool. But if you want the soul of the tool, The bit that makes you stand up, go to work, go into arduous situations, that thing that gives you the drive, the hardening and tempering in this case, that is something you impart into the tool. And that's something you should know how to do.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm looking around for our pair of half-inch tongs. Do we lose them? They were V-bit. We had them. Yeah, they were here earlier. Hit it. Look at it. Is that where you want it to be? And it'll do. Now I hit that, and you can see, hopefully, with Carl's help, that should be somewhere near the middle. There we go. But what I have this curved transition here when I drew that down over the bit. So I can't just slap this over and go to work, can I? Okay, just going to take another little hit there. They're the ones, yeah. Mm-hmm. See if those will fit that hat just a little more grippy.
A little more grippy.
A little more grippy.
Grippy.
Yeah, squeezy grippy things. You never taught in the blacksmith school, have you? Look at the squeezy wacky tappy thing. Yeah. Lovely, thank you. All right, that's too hot to back punch. All I'm going to do is I'll put a little bubble backwards and forwards. So I'm going to back punch here over the bick. I'm just going to wait for it to cool down. What I can do is park the tool in the middle of that lot and just set that so it's ready. And I'm going to wait for it to cool down. Wait, wait. I'm thinking now would be reasonable. That's my little biscuit. Just convince that to come out. Auction item, hole in bar.
Wow.
So why do we slot punch? Why didn't I just round punch it? Well, I can put a half-inch hole in a 1-inch bar, no problem, can't I? Okay, it leaves me 1/4-inch walls. Can I put a half-inch hole in a half-inch bar?
Sure. No.
With a round punch?
No.
No. So I have to change my method, don't I? So that's the change of method. Now I need something that I can drift to make round. Let's see if I've got a drift that's going to drift that round. I've spoken of drift. That'll do. So let's take a piece of modelling clay, plasticine, call it what you will. That you understand where I'm coming from. Yep. If I pull it apart, what happens to the outside surface? Does it just come along with me, or does it start to rip and tear just by pulling it? It rips and tears. Yeah. So if I want to make the clay longer and thinner, I squeeze it, don't I? Okay, and it won't rip and tear. Then it just moves. So when I drift now, I would like, when finished, a 1-inch hole in this bar. Okay, but my slot punch, as we made yesterday, is only 3/4 of an inch long. So how do I get 3/4 of an inch out of a 1-inch? How do I get 1 inch out of 3/4? So I'm just opening up that hole, and I'm opening it until my drift fills the void. Okay? So I don't have a 1-inch hole, do I not? So if I continue to drive that through in an effort to gain my 1-inch hole, what I'm going to do, it's like pulling the plaster apart, it's just going to rip and tear. What I need to do is squeeze it to make it go in the direction I want. So that's going to be my next move. First of all, I'm going to trim off the excess, and you can do that with a square punch, or you can make a purpose-built, as I've done, round punch. And I did mine slightly differently. I dropped mine into a swage, and then I filed the crown. And then Ernie was talking about the bevel. Don't forget, the bevel can be where you want it to be. Where do you want to leave the slope? Do you want to leave the slope on the inside? Do you want to leave the slope on the outside? Do you want it to be a neutral axis? That's your decision. It doesn't just have to be on the outside. It can be wherever you want it to be. So if we take something that's hot and we quench it, what should happen? It gets brittle. And if it's got a nick in it, does it have a weak point? And if I put the weak point on there and hit that, should that not just break off? Rather than trying to look for a plate or something to go through on, and it'd be difficult for me to put the curved chisel out there and get the shearing effect, so I just quenched it and made it hard. Just going to give that a little rasp, then we're going to squeeze. That'll do. We just... Thank you, James. So I'm holding the hole at a slight angle to the bick, or horn. So I'm going to describe the horn in perhaps terms that you've not heard it before. So the horn is very thick at one end and much, much thinner at the other end. It's true. Okay. So let's describe that in terms of, if I put something here, I have a lot of support on one side and less support on the other side. With me? So if I hit this with a flat blow, the stuff that has support is going to be squashed and will move, will forge. The stuff that has no support will be pushed down until sometimes it reaches support and then it will move. So if I work here, the aggregate is this bit gets pushed, this bit goes down, the whole thing is going to make a corkscrew. If you don't want that, why don't we just even up the support? We can lessen the support here, increase the support here, and now we've got something that's a bit more table-like, but still has the properties of that baseball bat in the cow poop, which is what I want. So that's why I'm holding it at a slight angle. There are some truisms in blacksmithing that we don't often speak of. And one of them would be, if you don't want it to get any thinner, don't hit it there again. Yeah, you've been there, yeah. Why is it getting thinner? Thank you. Lovely. It's 1 inch wide. Okay, so we're looking at a 1 inch hole or thereabouts. James. Now we're going to put a slight bevel to this, and when I work I like my tong hand to be free and my hammer hand pretty much staying plain. I don't mind moving sort of that way, but I don't really want to do this if I can possibly avoid it. So I'm going to move my tong hand, which some people call the smart hand or whatever. One inch, yeah. So now we're going to do the church key shape. There's a ton of ways you could do this. You could probably just take the hat and bang the bottom bit on the anvil and make a church key shape.
Are you taking into account the plus shrinkage?
Oh, harsh, Paul. Harsh. We'll never know because I'm going to change the shape. But good thought. Let me come to your next demo. Okay. So I'm just going to try and sweep that around. And I'm going to encourage you to try and do it this way. Just because it's going to help you to learn the Bic. And yes, you could have just put the circle on the anvil, quench the hat, knock it down. You could hit it against the top. All of those are fine. Yeah, knock yourself out. But we're here to do a little experimentation. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. If you weren't interested in learning, you wouldn't have come. So take what you're going to learn and apply it, and just challenge yourself every now and again. So back to William Hogarth. Dead flat. So I don't want that. I want something that's going to be a little more interesting for me to look at. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do, yeah, that's it. Actually, we're going to heat just there at the transition, and I'm going to put the little bottle opener thingy on. So it's funny, this is called the bob punch. Anybody know why? I don't. Yeah?
A what?
A bob punch. Have you heard of a monkey tool? Yeah? Do you know where that gets its name? It was developed by a Frenchman, Monsieur Key was his name. And so if you look at the abbreviation for Monsieur, it's M-O-N, and it was originally billed as Monsieur Key's tenon shouldering tool, which was of course a mouthful. Then it became Mon Key's tenon shouldering tool, then it became the Mon Key tool, and eventually that was it, the monkey tool. You know? And that's how it's got its name. Yeah. Do you want land in Florida?
This could be a one-sided one.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. With you. I'm just forging out the little tab. What's that bit called? I have no idea. What's that bit
Cap
called?
grab.
Sorry?
The cap grab.
The cap grab. There we go. The official title. Oh, we'll brush it. Why not?
Worn out as many of those as I have. So I don't know what that is. That's just what I call it. The oaky first.
You know, just that bottom loop. Yeah. I joined a job that was defunct 200 years ago, and I start producing bottle openers just as they come out with the twist top. You know, it's been the story of my life. We'll do this, and then we'll take a little break because Wayne wants to change the discs, and then we'll come back all probably be 10.2, 5.2 or something like that. And if anybody wants to do a little product testing with this, bring it in and we can do a little product test.
Will it be heat treated appropriately?
It will be heat treated appropriately.
As long as you get paid.
That's right, yeah. Thank you. So face down, I'm going to come here and I'm going to hit the two sides as I lower my tong hand to about 45 degrees. Let me do that. Does that help you, Carl? Yep. Okay. Very good. And then I'm going to turn it over to 45 degrees, put half of the loop on, and now I'm going to do the same sort of thing as I lower my hand. And that, oops, should give us a joggle. Technical term. I'll give that a little brush. Give that a quench.
All we need now is a beer.
All we need now is a beer.
Where's Mark?
So you can either keep that with Rocky Mountain Smiths or you can put it in the auction. I care not which. They have to bring it back to the conference? Yeah. All right, let's take a 5 or 10 minute, let these guys